Goedemorgen. Anybody who understood that, raise your hand, please. There we have it, right there. Good, good, good. You can see I'm carrying your country colors, right? If you don't know, you need to do some research, get some art in your background. This is Van Gogh, and this is Mondrian. So those of you who don't know, you're Dutch artists. You know, you can have your introduction right there. I'm delighted to be here. I've known Craig since the 90s, you know, long before any of this stuff. And he was a nomad, maybe still is. And I was anchored, but then I became a nomad, so I got my advice from him on how to be a nomad. And he said, I have 2 suitcases, and I can't take anything because if someone gives me a piece of paper, I have to take a piece of paper out. Whatever I get, that goes in. So I tried that, and I found that for my nomading, 2 suitcases is much too much. I have a picture of me on a bicycle with my 2 suitcases in a wagon train behind me, pulling them, moving from building to building. So I went to 1 suitcase. Agile, right? That's the thing, travel light. I started in 1991 interviewing projects for IBM to find out what worked and didn't work for small talk. Java wasn't around at the time, C++. And my boss said, we don't have any, competing product. So anything that works, just find out what works. So I interviewed projects. So when people say, what was the origin or the background of the Agile Manifesto, they have to include me because I preceded Scrum, I preceded XP, I preceded all of those. And my stuff was not based on, gee, I have a good idea, we should do this. It was based literally on interviewing teams and saying what worked, what didn't work, what did you like, what did you not like, what would you do again, what would you not do again. Made the big list. I ended up actually getting a PhD in this 10 years later in 2003 at the University of Oslo. So anything I tell you either is like science, I'll show you a little bit of science, some graphs, and this is connected to that. Or if you ask me questions, it's because either I did it on a project or a person told me they did it on a project and they liked it, right? So my first book was in 1997 called Surviving OO Projects, and people literally wrote to me and said, we did that and it saved our project, right? So these things, there's some meta information. Those of you who can take, like meta tips is listen to the stories, and look for what was the active ingredient in the stories. And when I started being consultant, I was, shy and embarrassed. And I literally said, well, there was a person who told me that da-da-da-da-da-da, and they did this, and we tried it, and it worked. And I became a consultant. One day I stopped telling the story and just gave the punchline and said, we should do this. But still, these days, I'm back to trying to tell the story. So just meta tip. Just go after the stories. So when I tell you something, it's because we did it, someone did it, or it's science. It's like that. Now, I created, about 10 years ago, Agile had just gotten too complicated, and I created a forward summary of everything you need to know. Collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. You collaborate to deliver, you reflect to improve. I offer nothing than that besides that anymore. There is nothing more than that, and it's actually much bigger than Agile. It really is about trying to make a team more effective internally and also with the results. So team effectiveness, making the work of teams more effective. The better you collaborate, the better things go. The worse you collaborate, the worse things go. It's obvious, but the bosses don't put money on it. So I go around the world trying to convince bosses to have, as it's a formal meme for me, every company or organization, every project, every team, every department should have a top-level budget line item for improving collaboration. If you don't, you're not serious about it. So that's how heavy collaborate is. Now, deliver is all the stuff with lean, Kanban, flow, learning, deliver for learning, all that stuff, stage delivery for value. It's all of that, okay? People don't often stop and reflect. So I separated inspect and adapt into 2 parts. One is just pause. Breathe, stop working on the product, think about, check your emotions, check the data, where do you want to go, all that stuff. And then you make baby improvements everywhere. So collaborate to deliver, reflect to improve. That's literally all you need. You will never stop getting better in one of those four. And you can't mind map it. I'll show you a mind map, but everything fits in. So it's not even, I call it the heart of Agile because I got there, but in fact it's about team effectiveness. So anything I ever say will be oriented around these four words, which is not a framework, it's not a process. I'll get to that. But with these four words is how I approach any topic. So the topic that we started with, because AI has pretty much, people go, well, we don't need Agile anymore, we have AI. And AI actually, in a sense, completes the Agile agenda, because we wanted to be able to generate software systems so fast that, you know, we could keep up with the changing industry. Well, now the generating of the product is so much faster that actually, for me, the next question is, how do you get feedback? Because you can make a new system every hour, but you can't get feedback every hour. So that was a little bit the topic, how does it change AI? I am not an expert on AI. I don't intend to be. My style, my method is to wait till an organization is doing it, then I will fly anywhere in the world and ask them how they do it, what they did, what they didn't do, and then I have a message for other people, right? So until I see that being done, I have no information. And right now the AI is changing. Yeah, it's great. No, it's horrible. Yeah, it's great. No, it's horrible. So in my last class, in the last Heart of Agile class, I just did an experiment and I said, hey gang, I don't know, let's just do this. How many of you people really use AI properly in your work for real work purposes and get some value out of it? Raise your hands. There should be. How many of you, keep your hand up if you're programmers? Put your hand up if you're non-programmers and you're getting value. See, it changes all the jobs, but when you try to connect the jobs across an organization, something different happens. So we're there. So just for fun, I had people who hadn't used AI before, and yeah, and so literally it's like this. I went to Claude and I said, please make me a Reversi game. It did it, right? And I said, good, let's run it. But then when we ran it, all of the people in the room ran into this. I put in taper, and so you see the T. If you don't know what the game is, you'll figure it out in a moment. So I guess taper, and it says the T is in the word but not in the right place. A, P, R are not in the word. E is in the word, not in the right place. So I got, that is Scout, and it said, well, there's an O somewhere, and the T is at the end. So I did that. But look at attempt 4, Epcot. I love this. We were cracking up. It says E. Wait, see, it marked E as gray, like not in the word. Wait, that's strange. E should be in the word, exclamation mark. Not in the word, not in the word. Same with O. Oh, no, I think I made an error in my earlier feedback. Let me reconsider. Actually, looking back at my clues, it appears the word might only have T. What we know for sure, none of these letters are in the word with an E and an O, right? So I said, okay, let's run one more, and I put in detox with an E and an O. It says, let me check. I need to point out that E and O were just shown as not in the word. After looking back at my feedback, I realized I made errors. In guess 1, I said E and T were in, and in guess 2, I said O and T were in, but then I guess 4, E and O is not, which contradicts my earlier clues. I apologize. I got confused with my own game state. Would you like me to start over or continue? So that's where we are in the vibe programming world, right? Those of you who are actually getting value of it are learning to control it a little bit better. But that's just, you know, because of the state of that, I don't try to predict what's AI going to do to us, like not my specialty. So let's now, good. So 10 years ago, I wanted to take Agile outside of software into a completely general universe. So I had to get rid of all of the references to products and work products and software and everything. And it turns out if you replace all of those words with the word decision, you can now apply the general ideas of Agile anywhere. Because every organization is making decisions. It doesn't matter if you're in organizational change, or if you're in marketing, or if you're doing something with installing solar in a village or something. Everything you do is based on people making decisions and then turning those decisions into actions in the world. So we can actually simplify all of the Agile and make some nice consequences just by using decisions instead of work products. So I had to go back and say, what's Agile? Because up to that time, I said Agile is whatever was in the manifesto because that's what we wrote. But that was targeted to software. So I just looked at the dictionary definition, and it's the ability to move and change direction quickly and with ease. Yeah, fair enough. We knew that. Those of you who know English, that's what Agile means. And why is it important? It's because the world is changing so fast, you can't make long-term plans. You can't. That means that every company, every organization, every team, every product team, every individual has to develop the ability to move and change directions quickly and with ease, particularly the change directions part. So we all need to get a little bit more, slightly better at, we don't say yes, no, are you Agile, are you not Agile, but we're going to have to develop the skill to do this, and that's then what I'm going to talk about. Now, the problem that I had, again, 10 years ago was even Scrum was much too complicated, and people were doing social impact projects. Some village in the mountains of Patagonia, you're not going to show up with a Scrum Master and an impediment list and all of that stuff. So we needed something super simple, and as it turns out, with these 4 words, it's not only simpler, it's more general. So anybody, anywhere in the world, you can talk about collaboration, you could talk about delivery, you could talk about reflect is hard in some places, so just we're not used to it, and improving. So these are the basics. You just never get away from them. In the some military, they call this brilliance in the basics. You just master the basics forever, and you just get better. You will never escape these things. So it works in any context now. It's not just Agile anymore, but it's very useful 4 words. Now, people love to think that anything is a process. We had to get away from anybody thinking this is some kind of a process. And so my colleague, Sole Pinter, from Argentina, now lives in Belgium, came up with the metaphor of a compass, because you don't try to use all 4 points of a compass. With a compass, you think about where you want to go, and then you choose some direction. So do we need more of this or more of that? So she said the Heart of Agile is a compass to decide in which direction to advance the conversations. So that's very cool, because it gets us out of the process metaphor completely, and we're just in conversations. Which conversation is appropriate to advance today? Should we be talking more and putting energy around the collaboration aspect of our enterprise? Should we be focusing on delivery? Should we take a pause, reflect? Is it time to do improvements or whatever? So it's just a matter of where you want to put your energy, and here are the certain kinds of conversations that you would have in the different sectors. And there you see, particularly under collaboration, there's not a shred of process in there. We're talking about improving trust. We actually have to change possibly the reward structure, that the bosses get their bonuses based on team-based results, not individual results, that line employees for their annual appraisals are getting evaluated on the quality of their collaboration. So is the better organization a better organization to work in because they're there, distinct from their, like professional forward-moving activities? Reflect, we're going to check data and emotions, and we do baby steps, and I'll show you that just very, very briefly. So this is what I use to examine any question these days, and so there's a kind of a mind map. And you can go online and you can find talks I gave. The best was actually in Denmark, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, and I really did a step through, like all of the parts of that mind map, which I won't do today, obviously. But there's nothing that doesn't fit there. What's interesting is when you take a topic and you see where does it hook in, like that. Normally I go around and forth. What I want to do here, because a little bit the topic on the table is the AI question, I'm going to split delivery into 2 parts, and you'll see and I need to talk about people in between the 2 parts. So here, when we talk about delivery, we've got the internal flow of decisions through an organization. We've got the lean startup deliver for learning, and we've got the stage delivery kind of a thing. And I have not mastered this clicker. The thing I like to think about is that the organization is a giant brain, and the people are the neurons. So that as people talk, the organization is doing a sort of a calculation or forming a result, the work of all the neurons and building whatever it is. It could be a product, it could be a marketing plan, it could be a strategy announcement, it could be anything. The organization is moving decisions around between the people doing this. Now, the thing about humans as neurons is we have legs. So people walk off, wander off in the middle of this computation, and they go on, they go on vacation or paternity leave, maternity leave, they get sick, whatever. And then they come back, and this calculation has been moving. And so we have to catch them up with what's the current state, of what's going on. And this explains why Agile people love to have little bits of paper all over the wall, because that's a way of externalizing the state of the computation. So what I'm doing now is kind of explaining a little bit, how it comes about that the Agile people do the things that they do, right? So that's one of them, is you're externalizing the state of this computation so people can follow. We'll look at that in a moment, but the other thing that's key is in the stats that I've seen. One came from a nuclear power center, and they calculate, they log every error of every kind that's made and put them into buckets. And I just saw in passing, I didn't manage to catch the source, that they have that people make errors in decision making at the rate of 1 in 5. 1 in 5, that's a huge number. Now, I don't happen to, it doesn't matter if it's 1 in 5, 1 in 10, but you're not going to make 20 decisions in a row without making an error somewhere or being wrong. We can also check in software. They say that in any system, people don't, there's 20% of the features that never get used, which is, guess what? 1 in 5, right? So I don't care, 1 in 5, 1 in 10. There's a lot of errors being made, and the game is, and now we're back to Agile again, the game is how soon can you find the errors? So the feedback loops are super important. The earlier you find the error, the less expensive it is to fix. And also you don't make, if you have a wrong decision here, you put the whole team's energy cascading, building on a wrong decision. When you finally found it's wrong, you have to roll back here and start over. So the earlier you find the mistake, the better. And there's been a lot of lean startup move this forward. There are very good techniques for this. But I just want to show this, because this is your average organization for any kind of activity. It doesn't matter if it's software development, marketing, any kind of organizational change, anything. You have a flow of decisions going from person to person. Maybe you have an executive sponsor here, a marketing vice president who says, our next strategic market is going to be, or our next strategic partner is going to be. That's just a decision. From that, other people make decisions. And just to take a look at the numbers for a minute, if you have a 300-page requirements document, anybody who's old enough or works in a kind of an industry where they have a 300-page requirements document, you get 50 decisions per page, so you've got 15,000 decisions, if my math's right. Let's say errors 1 in 10, so that means you have 1,500 mistakes in there, and you can't possibly find it. You can't, right? It's just all text. That's what we fought against with the Agile Manifesto. We didn't like that. But it doesn't matter. You've got this big lumpy system, so they throw 15,000 decisions over to the system designers doing database design, UI design, application design, right? We got 1,500 buried errors in there. Then everybody goes and does their thing. They add more errors. They build errors built on errors, throw them over to the testers. And the testers then find errors, and they throw, guess what? I worked on a project, we had 4-digit error numbers, right? So 10 to the third, the errors are in the thousands, right? Lumpy things, so you're working on something new, but you've got rework and new work, and you're going crazy, and you can't tell when anything's going to finally be delivered because the movement is so lumpy. Not only that, if there's a change, you can't change because everything's just partial work in progress. You literally can't just ship what you have. Now, this matches exactly car manufacturing, which is very surprising. But if you go back to the 1960s in Detroit, they had the premise that sooner or later someone would buy the car. And so it didn't matter if you had car parts stacked up to the ceiling in the factory, internal inventory, was considered free because sooner or later somebody would buy that car. So they would optimize for the most expensive machine pressing the body shapes. And they really cared if that machine was running at 100%, and they could deal with car parts stacked everywhere else. The problem being is if a movie comes out and the hero's driving a different car, they can't change the factory because it's full of car parts. The same is true with ideas. If you have ideas and decisions partially formulated, partially validated, all stacked up in requirements and design documents and test cases and whatever you've got and whatever the marketing version of that is, and something happens, you're stuck. You cannot deliver early. You cannot change. Your organization is locked up. So we don't like that picture. So I'll go to Toyota, if I can figure out how to make this work. Toyota, after World War II, they didn't have any money. They couldn't afford internal inventory. So they mastered the art of the single-piece flow. Okay, now it turns out you find mistakes earlier, the corrections are cheaper, delivery comes out sooner, and guess what? You can change directions more easily. So what that means is in the world of ideas, we would like the smallest request to come in from the beginning. We want to chop that into tiny, tiny pieces, do all the little internal, this is wrong, that's wrong corrections, and then deliver the smallest possible thing at the end so that we find the errors earliest. And people who work this way tend to find that their life is quieter because they're in baskets and are not overflowing everywhere, right? And then when you deliver something and then you find that the market changes, then it's easier to change. So it's more agile in that sense. This now explains why the agile people want to have, the technical term is a minimal marketable feature. Came from a book in 2005. It's the smallest unit that the customers will accept, that they'll pay money for. Anything smaller than that's nice, but doesn't make any difference. If you're doing a word processor and all you develop is italics, people are not going to just pay for italics, right? You have to have more than that before they'll honor the change in the release. So the agile people will take a minimal marketable feature. If you're doing some variety of Scrum, you've got a product backlog, and a unit in the product backlog should be something that you care about on the outside. Then you go internally, you slice it into little tiny things so that the programmers write their stuff, to test it, integrate it, little tiny pieces, right? We're looking for, in general, how to make smaller packets of decisions going through the organization so we error correct sooner, deliver less, learn more, and then we can trail and follow. So this is the theory part, and it explains why the agile people kind of work the way that they work. So this is very, very nice now, and if we talk about AI and code generation, or I have a friend who works for Lockheed Martin Marietta in the US, and I asked her, I said, are you guys using any of this AI, any of these tools? And she's, oh my God, yes, everybody's using it. It makes us so much faster. And I said, really, like what? She said, what? You could imagine that, think of these large language models, they're just fast typists. They're really good at predictive text. So, like I didn't have to explain what is Reversi. I just said, give me a Reversi game. It knew. So what they do is they have to generate the 300-page requirements document. So guess what? That's a lot of typing. So they use the large language model to generate that. And then the next people need the design specs, top-level design specs. They take this, they use some LLMs, and out come the top-level design specs. Now we're in 1,000 pages or 800 pages, and the next people take the second-level design specs, and out come 1.5, 2,000 pages, and then the coders take that and they use LLMs, and out comes the code. And I said, but does it really add, like tech specs are tough. You have to add a lot of industry knowledge, and does the rhyme just, it adds stuff. It knows the topic, and it adds things. And I tested it. I asked a long time ago, I just asked ChatGPT to make a Cockburn-style use case for checking out and make sure you've got 2 credit cards and you can split credit cards. That's about all I told it, and it gave me a beautifully formatted Cockburn-style use case and had conditions and extensions that I never specified, right? So it knows enough to add information. So even at Lockheed Martin, it's adding information relevant and pertinent and correct to the whatever they're building, whatever that may have been. So it's fascinating. So when we say, where's the impact of AI? It's all of these people. Now, the problem is that I'm waiting for, right? Because I'm a bit of a scientist and I make a prediction and I wait and see if it's true or false, is that now people can work in these big lumpy things again, right? We got everybody working in the other one, but now I just say, give me a Reversi game, like how many decisions are in there? So I'm waiting to see if it's so good that one piece of movement is correct enough that a bunch of those decisions equals one thing, or if we're going to have a backlash because it's got errors and then you got to find the errors and all the rest of it. So here's one place where the large language models absolutely have an impact. And those of you who are using AI in non-software production, you know what I'm talking about. It's not those guys that they're using it for. I have a friend who's using it. They read the Slack channels, and they're using it to gauge the mood of the people on the project. Are they worried? Are they not worried? Are the people being stressed out, right? So they're also doing psychological analyses of the team in flight, you know, with the large language models. So these things are really, really powerful. All right. But I have to, before I can finish the delivery part, I have to jump to the people part because that will affect the delivery part also. And this obviously is, everything gets affected by AI because you can use it as a third brain, as a mediator or facilitator in a discussion, even on a collaboration topic, right? Let's not minimize that. The idea of having a third brain as a fairly objective conversation partner to help you reflect and say, you know, what are you hearing about? What are we not asking? What are we not asking is a great thing to ask your LLM partner. I have friends who do that all the time. It's really interesting what it turns up. But we've got still, guess what? People are still mad at each other. People still don't share information. People still don't trust each other. People still don't delegate. We still have silos. We still have the problem with evaluations and rewards. So there's a limited influence of AI on these. And I just want to walk through some of the topics here because these are interesting and relevant topics in all cases. So maybe it's a good thing for you to see. This is a chart from a Danish friend of mine, Neil Nicolaisen. He's been CIOCOOCTO, never CEO. And he wrote a book, co-wrote a book called Stand Back and Deliver. And he has this 2x2 chart. That's how you know he's a management consultant. All management consultants have 2x2 charts. And I can never read them. I get confused. So what we know is you want to be in the upper right corner and you don't want to be in the lower left corner. So I just made this funny bridge shape so I could understand his 2x2. And he says people start off down here in command and control. And the problem is you don't get a lot of good results that way. If you really want good results, you need to increase trust and ownership everywhere. And so we'll talk a little bit, just a tiny bit about that, but just this is autocratic leadership here, and I'll talk a little bit about guest leadership. But when he goes into a place, this is his game. This game is how do I get it so people feel ownership, they take ownership, they feel they're trusted, and then they can all run, you know, at their maximum capacity. And so that's his 2x2 chart. But in it, to explain it, I need to go back in time. Are there people in here who know what Theory X is and Theory Y from management? We have a pretty well-read group. Thank you very much. So this goes back to the 1970s. Some professor at MIT Sloan School of Management produced a paper. And what was cool, when you think about it, he was documenting a change in management style. He wasn't so much making a prediction, he was documenting. And he said back in the previous generations, going back to the 1890s, Taylor, we talk about Taylorism and stuff, and up to the 1950s and on, It was literally the presumption that workers are lazy and stupid. It was in the literature. Workers are lazy and stupid. You have to tell them what to do. You have to kick them or they won't move, right? That was the underlying assumption. And so, therefore, there was a lot of yelling at people. Now, I think if I'm shoveling coal and you come up behind me and you go, faster, faster, right? My adrenaline kicks in and I go faster. So it's positive reward to the boss, right? Not to me, but to the boss. But it works. Now, however, if you're doing some UI design or you're doing the annual tax calculations or you're designing or whatever, a marketing initiative, and your boss comes up behind you and goes, faster, faster, right? Do you go faster? No, your brain freezes, right? Fear, amygdala, all that stuff. Prefrontal cortex shuts down, all that stuff. If your boss did that 3 times a day, your productivity goes to 0, right? So what we know is that mental work gets worse under stress. And so this guy in the 1970s was saying, and he called it Theory Y, he was saying he was seeing a different management approach where the underlying assumption was that, in fact, that the workers are intelligent and motivated, and now the role of management would be different, which is more like directional guidance and listen like that. And so Theory Y was born. And now here's how people pervert stuff. I have a thing that your idea will either be ignored or abused, and you don't get to choose which, right? So if you have a bright idea and it's not being abused, that's because no one's using it. So I have a methodology called Crystal Clear, which has not been abused. And a friend of mine says, sure dodged that bullet, didn't you? How many of you have heard of Crystal Clear? Oh, you guys are too good. Most people don't know what it is, which, makes my point. Somebody wrote to me every now and then, used to be, not anymore. They'd say, Alistair, I'm doing a, master's thesis study, something on agile methods, and I have, data from like 200 Scrum projects and 80 XP projects or something like that. Do you have any Crystal Clear projects? And I go, let me think for a second. I think there's maybe 7. If maybe we could find 7. And then they never talk to me anymore. I'm not good for their data. But how people abuse this, so I used to use, in Theory X is a push model. You push, right, stuff onto the employees. What we want is the employees to be pulling work, right? That's what we want, right? So I go to this manager, I'm giving a talk, and I say, yeah, it's not pushing anymore, it's pulling. And the guy goes, oh, I can't push? That's no problem, I can pull. I go, no, that's not what I mean, right? So you have to watch all your words because people will abuse whatever you say. And I say it's choosing, pulling, permitting. I just try to find words for that. Come on, boy. Now, here's a really interesting thought experiment I did, which explains a lot, and I'll just pull them all up there, is there's a company, and let's say it's a publicly traded company. Wall Street is unforgiving, right? The stock is unforgiving. They don't care if everybody gets ulcers and divorced and sick, as long as the share price goes up or whatever. So they're all Theory X down on the CEO. I've met the CEOs. They have miserable lives because they cannot say no to their boss. And they're traveling, destroying their families, like everything. It's very Theory X from the bottom. But we want this Theory Y, this choosing, pulling, quiet brain down at the bottom. That means necessarily that some manager is what I call the push-to-pull umbrella. Has to take... Back even when I was in my 20s, people would say a good boss acts as a heat shield. We have all these words that imply they take the heat, right, like this. And the problem is the people down below can't see the pressure. The better they do the job, they can't see the pressure this person's facing. So if any of you have a good, quiet life down here, look up. Somewhere above you is some manager taking the heat for you. And that guy, Neil Nicolaisen, was one. He was CIO of some place. And when he went, the management told him, don't give any work to our programming team. They're horrible, useless. They don't produce anything. Plan to outsource everything. Well, he did his umbrella trust ownership thing. And within a year, that team was producing magnificently. And I said, congratulations. You have changed the culture of the organization. I have never seen that done before. Well done and kudos. And he said, not so fast. I left, and within 6 months, the management was doing that again and broke everybody, okay? So that push-to-pull umbrella, he said, I was that. Thank you for telling me what I was doing. That's what I was doing. So think about that. That's just like how we play with the theory, right? We take some words, take some notion, see what the ramifications of that are. Now, I call that autocratic leadership, and I coined this word, guest leadership. Let's jump into leadership for a minute. There's this lovely book I still haven't bought and read, and I don't know why. It's called Lateral Leadership from 1999. Getting it done when you're not the boss. Why I haven't bought that book, I got no idea. But they were already talking about that in 99. This is a book everybody should get. It's called Host. Mark McCargow and Helen Bailey deconstructed the parallels between being a manager or boss and hosting a party. And I don't have time in this particular talk to go into the details, but it used to be called host leadership. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't buy that, because when you're a leader, you have to get somewhere. You have to get there. When you have a party, you don't have to get anywhere. You just have a nice time and everybody goes home. When they made the book, they took off the word leadership, which is really great. And I find that it matches what most managers have to do. Most managers are given an assignment and a team, and they don't get to make any decisions about that, and they have to make it work. And now it looks a lot more like hosting a party, how you set up the environment, connect people, and all the rest of that. So that's great. And then Esther Derby came up with a nice framework which ties things together. But could someone get me some bubbly water, a glass of fizzy water from the red thing there? I forgot to bring mine up. But I'm kind of an anarchist a little bit. I don't like to have a boss. I don't like to be a boss. I think that maybe she's got, I don't know. The man's got me. Thank you so much. He's got it taken care of. Beautiful. I don't like to have a boss. I don't like to be a boss. I just like a network of friends who get stuff done. So I didn't like this concept of host leadership, because you have one host, one boss, and a bunch of people. So I said, what would happen if the guests became leaders, if the guests were leaders? Now, if you come to my parties, every guest better be a bit of a leader, because my way of setting up a party is I'll get a bottle of wine and a block of cheese, and I have a fire pit, and I have a stereo system, and I'm done. Show on up with everything. So people come with the balloons, they come with the food, they come with the DJ, somebody likes to light the fire, somebody brings the DJ ball and the lights, and they're playing it, right? So at my parties, there's a bunch of guest leaders. But in any normal party, you guys know, you run out of beer. And somebody says, hey, I'll make a beer run. Anybody want to come? And they go, who wants a beer? Who wants a beer? They run again. That is a moment where the guest became a leader, temporarily, right? Just like this. And I think this is actually what glues society together. We see a neighborhood. Someone decides to do a neighborhood cleanup. Someone decides to do a neighborhood party. At work, somebody one day decided to do the continuous integration machine. There was a time that was not a role, right? Somebody decides to celebrate birthdays, right? These are not anointed, appointed leaders. These are people who just step forward and do something, and then they go back to the regular role. So that's guest leadership, and I'm fascinated by that, because I see occasionally an organization where there's good guest leadership, and man, they move so fast, because anybody has any idea, and they're pop, 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 pop. They don't wait on the boss. So I like the word guest leadership as a partner to the word host leadership. And so this picture up there was the first thing after I had the idea. It was in Brazil, some family, struggling out there. And you can tell it was not the lifeguard who had this idea, because the lifeguard has a boat, vroom, and goes out there and pulls them in. Somebody who was not anybody had the idea to form a human chain, and they got 80 people to bring them back. And then they all went back to, bathing in the sun. So that's guest leadership, and that's the power of guest leadership. And I just want to show that, because as people, at the leaf levels of the organization, the actual doers, if we more honor their initiative and their integrity, and we give them more chances to shine, then they will take all these little opportunities and move. I do have one example in Australia, a company called REA.com, realestateassociates.com, which is all online real estate for buying houses, and they pretty much just dominate the market. And I went to interview them just after they had shifted over to becoming Agile, and I actually talked to the guy who did it, because I thought it was impossible to convert an organization. And I was like, but you did this in what did you do? It wasn't too big at the time, but still, it was notable. And he said, I just said yes to whatever they said. At that time, pick a number, 2008, I'll pick a number roughly speaking, 2008. You know, people were saying, hey, can we take the walls down between the cubicles? And no, we have facilities, but he said, yes, like, I don't know, yes. Can we get some sofas so we can sit around and talk? Yes. Can we try Amazon Cloud? They were up in Amazon Cloud before anybody. Can we try some Amazon Cloud? Yes. So he had the whole organization was moving, and then they beat all their competitors. So they were a happy success story. So that's guest leadership. There's a host. The vertical things is a kind of a process chart, which is less interesting to me. The thing that fascinates me personally are the 4 circles. Like I said, they deconstructed what a host does. And the host is with the guests, acting as a connector. Hey, I'd like you to meet this person that I think something interesting. That's what they're doing in there with the guests. They maybe make an announcement. Everybody, it's time for dinner or whatever. There's a car parked behind some car. Could you please move your car? Whatever. They're in the spotlight. Over here, they're in the kitchen, slicing bread, pouring, making sure the caterers are doing their job. And the one that caught me off guard was in the gallery, just kind of watching, assessing, right? This is a great description of what a manager does, right? It's very, very good. So I highly recommend this book. If I can get this thing to work, there's that. I already talked about that. Now, I don't know if I can read that from here. I'll read maybe the first one. This person said, I'm quitting my job. One last week of toxic boss, and then it's over. Bad bosses are a pox upon our society, and I will dedicate my professional life to their eradication. I'll radicalize the next generation so nobody is willing to work under a bad boss anymore. We're pretty She was 26 years old, talking about radicalizing the next generation, right? And then you can read the other two. But the punchline here is that you read these books on leadership, being a good leader hasn't changed. What's really changed is the people now expect their bosses to listen to them. They expect it. They demand it. If a boss doesn't listen to them, the boss is wrong, not that they're wrong. So if you're the kind of a boss and you feel guilty because you're the listening boss, you're on the right track. If you're like halvesies, now's the time to shift and go into the listening leader. I actually bought a book called The Listening Leader. And if you are the command and control type boss, it's like time to change or retire because we're done with that stuff. The world of leadership has changed not because the leadership rules have changed, but the people expect to be listened to. And I don't know if I have my tango slide on here. I like it, I don't. So I have to tell you, I dance tango. And I took a lesson from one of the founders of the modern tango stuff, Argentinian guy, obviously. And he said the most profound thing to me, because it was in 2018, I date stamped it. He said, 10 years ago, when I was a leader, I decided where I wanted my partner to be. And if I wanted her foot to be there, I made sure that her foot got there. He says, I can tell you now, that's the wrong way to do it. And he didn't even use the word leader. I say initiator. He says, I initiate a move. I have in my heart's heart what I want to do. I initiate a move, but maybe she misinterpreted me, her weight wasn't right, whatever. Whatever she does next, I follow her. Right? So he has to be double quick because he initiates. She has to figure out what he's initiating. Then he has to figure out where she's going, and then he joins her, so she's never wrong. You got that? That was profound for me, and I wrote it down. But then a couple of years later, I went to Buenos Aires, and I was in a dance with my teacher. How am I going to be the leader of my teacher? Like, she knows, like, I'm embarrassed. But anyway, we're dancing, a little bit, and suddenly she moves my foot. I'm going, what the hell? And she did that 2 or 3 times. Now, there's a thing in tango where the leader will move the follower's foot. It's a well-established, but I never seen that the follower moves the leader's foot. So the next time I was in my lesson with her and we're practicing something, she moves my foot again. I go, what are you doing moving my foot? She says, you weren't using that foot. I said, time to learn, right? But that's leadership, right? That's leadership. You're the boss, but you're like realestateassociates.com, right? But your employee makes a move. Your job is to figure out what to do with that, right? So that's leadership has changed. AI is not changing that, by the way. All right, let's go back here, and I'm watching the clock a little bit to make sure I get all done. I just wanted to, we were here, we did that. I want to show this slide because this is something I came up with like around 2008 or 2009. But I operate from this. This is a thing that works for one-person projects and 2,000-person projects. And it's about how much we learn as we go along through a project. Now let's take an old school project. Could be a marketing project, organizational redesign project. Happens all the time. Software project, any of them. People are all working. They don't actually learn very much while they're working because they haven't integrated and they haven't delivered to the world. And you remember all those errors? Those like 1,500 errors and stuff? If you do late integration of your software, all the unfounded assumptions and misconnections between the teams surfaces at one time. Now we've got, 10 to the third mistakes surfacing all at once. It's a bad time to learn. There's a lot to change. The search space is big. It's costly, right? Even if you don't do that, when you deliver to the market, the world thinks differently than you do anyway. And there's a bunch of latent errors that the market will find for you. And guess what? It's too late. So we don't like that picture. What we want to do is incorporate that into early learning. So we want to find a place where we get a surprise early. We're after all bad news early. All bad news early. The earlier we find it, the more time we have to fix it. Now there's a real art here to staging what are the questions we ask. Are we going to be in trouble because we've got the wrong business model, the UI design's wrong? Are we going to be in trouble because of the security problem, scaling problem, performance problem? Are we going to be in trouble because the people just haven't learned how to talk to each other yet? Maybe we've got the wrong people, but maybe the people think they're all mad at each other, but in fact, they just haven't learned to talk to each other. So there's actual learning to be done. So this little thing here, and cost schedule. Agile people hate cost schedule information, things like, but you need to know, is this bigger than a bread box? Is it smaller than a school bus? Can we get it done by Christmas? Or whenever the government regulation says we have to get it done. Hard deadlines are real things, right? The Olympics, there are all these kinds of things. You can't move the date. This is the only way to approach a project this way, where you start off reducing risk, learning, increasing the value curve, and you do it very deliberately. You stage things so that in case you're caught by surprise, you can deliver something early, and then you can add quality, finesse, more features, less important features. So if and I was in Nokia in 2008, I think it was, and the guy said, what can you Agile guys do for us big corporations? And I said, you've got, N thousand people, you have 150 products, you have 200 apps. You're doing a big bang integration in June. Everybody's got bugs, everybody's late. All you can do is work overtime and delay because you don't have any other strategy. If you work this way, risk-based, you will on June 1st be able to integrate the most important pieces or delay, and management gets to choose which one to do. They're not, right? And you were going to do a delivery release on October 1st. Everybody's behind as usual. If you work this way, business can decide release early or delay. This is the only strategy that allows you that third option, right? And I know this is pretty common practice in many places. If you haven't studied this, study it. And I just want to show this. I'm going to read this quickly. This is double checking the business. There's a technique called concierge. This has all been documented. It's all in books. This is all old stuff. But I caught this Twitter, and I screen snapshot it right away, and I wrote to the guy, I said, can I show it? He said, sure. I'm sure he's a tester. You'll see why. Brian, your next automated pizza delivery is scheduled for Saturday, February, to confirm, text yes, to decline, text no. Thank you, Papa John, you handsome man. I shall call you the Carbs Vixen. I had to translate that into French and Spanish. I have no idea what that was. We're sorry, we didn't understand. Please confirm or decline. When I make love, I imagine you tossing some dough shirtless. Dude, our automated system isn't set up yet. This is a real person texting you. I make minimum wage. Please just tell me if you want the pizza. So, you know, it's expensive to put the AI system in, and some joker's going to do that to your system. It's cheaper just to put a person there and you're testing it. So you do bad news early, right? You're discovering the parameters. The other one, if I've got the next one right, this is the guy at a company, and he is the first person to tell me he had a top-level budget line item for increasing collaboration. 2017, he said, I have $150,000 just to fly people back and forth between India and Australia, go out to restaurants, dinners, parties, whatever. I have the budget for increasing collaboration. Top-level line item, budget for increasing collaboration. Same guy. They bought all their competitors. He, I guess, got rich with his stock options. I hope, started a new company based in India, and he puts everything in practice, as you could guess. He said this, techniques inside the meeting, like giving people time to spend time and laugh and enjoy each other's company, time for social bonding, inside the project, inside the meetings, and so on. So that's, you know, that's important. And does AI fix that? No, AI doesn't fix that, is why I wanted to show you this here. Just very, very quickly here on the last part, we do micro improvements. We never ask for big changes. What's the smallest change you could make that would make the smallest visible difference in your organization or your team or your mood or anything? Do that, and then do that, and then do that, and then do that, and then do that forever. And so this is a really magic technique that we picked up from solution-focused psychotherapy. And they say, what are your best hopes and wishes? In fact, we're not going to spend any time there. It's just directional, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you now? Maybe it's a 4. I'm not very happy. I'm kind of, you know, we're not doing very well. Our team collaboration isn't so good. Our delivery pipeline isn't so good. Whatever it could be. And they say, so 4, if you have a 4, then it's not totally broken. There is something, there is evidence that something has worked somewhere. And the story I like to give is from a book. It was an industrial situation. The auditors came in. They were always having friction auditing the manufacturing process. So, in fact, Mark McCarrigow, the guy who wrote the host book, was also an expert in solution focus, said, has anybody ever had a not horrible interaction with an auditor? So one person raises their hand, and they go, well, what did you do? And I did this. And they go, everybody do that. So the next time they come, everybody does that. They meet afterwards. Did anybody have any not horrible experiences? Now they have more stories, and so you build up that way. So you have assets. They're not perfect, but it's something to work from. The next thing is you only ever try to get 1 point farther. So if you're a 4, you go to a 4.5 or a 5. What can we do that would get us a 4.5 or 5? Do not aim for 6, 8, 10, 4 to 4.5, 4 to 5. And then you do that, and you go, it's very rewarding, and you get. Now, I have a friend in Paris, Jerry Derbier. He only operates from the Heart of Agile and the solution focus or the micro improvements. He walks into an organization, he puts a big X up on the wall, you know, with like masking tape or something, has the people, he says, what's on your mind about these 4 topics? People put up Post-it notes. You can apply this topic to literally anything. He says, well, which one of these would you like to work on? And they pick one. He says, well, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? He's running, right? The guy, that's it. That's all he ever does. And, you know, he's a very nice guy, very good facilitator, but they just start moving and getting successes and so on. So it's remarkable. All right, so there's the thing. Check your emotions, decide where you really want to go. Then you've got data, web analytics. So AI is going to help you with the analytics, right? Any analytics you got, whether it's marketing stuff, whether it's the mood of the team in Slack or wherever, we'll do that. But then you dialogue, like, what are we going to do? You could even use the LLM as a conversation partner to monitor your reflection session. Hey, you know, LLM, could you be so kind? Maybe we didn't ask a question. Is there a topic you're hearing that's not being surfaced, right? So you can use it as an additional team member, but the game is still, you know, the minds of the agents. All right, I have this, it's blurry on purpose because it was just another Twitter screen snapshot back in the days when Twitter produced useful information. And David Koss, don't know the guy, said, can I show this? So I can't show what they wrote up there. But literally, he just had read Heart of Agile, put up the X, put up the forwards. He just did that, and he said, hey, this is a cool reflection technique. Right, so the final thing, you know, I said, okay, there's the Heart of Agile, and I promised to just reflect about, you know, the AI, what it affects and doesn't affect. For sure, the large language models are going to affect our delivery chain everywhere, every part of the delivery chain. We have that dangling question about how many decisions are now in play when it hallucinates and gets things wrong, how much rework, like how do you play that if you have a chain of people, not just one person? It does help with the analytics. But that mental stuff that we've got there, the leadership, trust, culture, skills development, micro improvements, that's not its domain, although we can use it as an additional team member just to help us reflect what we didn't ask, what it sees, you know, just to trigger us to become better us. So I think that's about it. It's still about people, but I want to leave that one up just so you can look at it. And I've tried to leave a little bit of time. These guys, you know, they'll pull me off stage but they're busy, so they don't see anything. Does anybody have any question or thought that you want to put on us before we go to the next speaker?
Yes.
We have one right here.
Not for the next speaker, but Alistair, you were mentioning about the guest leadership, and if you come to your party, I have to bring my own beer, for example, those kind of stuff. I can
tell he doesn't want to come to my party. No,
yeah,
look, only the right people come to my party. It's like self-filtering, right?
I have a culture problem, because if I would do that, then people would call me cheap. How is that with you?
Bothers me not at all.
Oh, that's really
It's
cool.
my party. People who know me know me.
Maybe you can connect your people with my people.
Yeah, that's right. But in the host, they always say, decide what kind of party. The host, and I jumped over it, but a good point, just to go back to that book, because it's that good. If you're the host of the party, you decide, first of all, what kind of a party. Is it a formal party, sit-down catered, black tie? Is it a masquerade party? Is it a bring-your-own party, right? Then you decide who to invite. This is the part that managers don't get to do. They're given a pile of people, right? So obviously, I'm going to invite the people who are, you know, in my personality zone, and I have friends who would never do that. They're always going to be, everything's like da 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 da, and that's fine. They invite people, you know, that work in that personality zone. And now we think about this. I want to now extrapolate this to organizations for a moment. You give me a nice doorway to pass through for that. And people say, you know, can we do organizational transformation? And I'm a pessimist, and I say no. Like at the level of 100%, I'm 100% no. You got that? You all hear that? If anybody's in the org transformation business, I'm terribly sorry. I just screwed up your business model. And I check with people who are in the business, and I say, have you ever seen one yet? And they go, no. Right? So the answer is no. I have seen 2 in 30 years. Okay, I have seen 2 in 30 years. One stayed and one fell over again. So I have seen 1 in 30 years, right? But when we think about this, what I did see successfully, because everything's a project interview, I went to Borland around 2006, Borland Software, Austin, Texas. And the guy was showing me all this awesome, you know, agile stuff. And I'm really perplexed because it looks like he succeeded. And I can't believe he succeeded, right? That's the way I go in. And then I asked him a few questions, and he says, no. I said, wow, you converted all of Borland to Agile? Like, this is completely amazing. I've never seen anything. He goes, no. We built a new building where Agile would be done. And only those people who were interested in working this way came, and all the non-people were over there. So again, by invitation, if we take that right, who bothers to go to work at a startup that's going to do Agile? People who are risk tolerant. Risk tolerant people are more willing to try new things. Who's going to work for big sedate corporations People who are risk intolerant, or especially in the US, all they care about is getting the healthcare benefits. I know some, they can't afford to leave. They show up 9 to 5, no work on the weekend, no risk tolerance whatsoever, do not get fired is their main mantra, right? So once you look at the building, you already know who's in the building. Once you look at my party, you already know who's coming to my party. Your people have a different party. We look at the host, we already know what kind of party it's going to be. So thank you for giving me that great little doorway to go into that section. Wonderful. We are at time. If you wish to pull the plug, we do have another speaker.
Let's have.
I know Bas is next. Where's Bas?
Exactly. So we have time for one question.
Bas is ready to jump up here. Bas is shaking his head.
Let's have at least one question, depending on the time of answering.
Yeah, I want to do a little bit agile archaeologist. So you show us this, it's not a 2x2, but you have this learning, you deliver late and then the learning comes, what do you call it? I learned that a long time ago from a friend. So I want to know, like, where is this idea from? Is it from you?
Probably. That curve I did in 2008 and published it. There was in 2000, about that time, I heard people saying, the outcome of a software development project is not the product, it's the learning. And I went, nonsense. Sorry, the outcome is the product or else you're not in business. But let's look at this, right? And there was a thing back, Grady Booch in 92, 3, 4, talked about a Gestalt round trip, which nobody understood. He said, you have to do a Gestalt round trip. And I used to say, how do you schedule, I'm doing a Gantt chart, how many weeks is it going to take you to complete your Gestalt round trip? Nobody knows the answer to that. But it turns out if you do a thin slice of the product and send it out, having completed all the way through the process, everybody suddenly understands the connections between the parts, right? And then they work much more efficiently because they know how these pieces. So I took these bits of a riddle and I go, what is this with the process and the Gestalt round trip and the learning? And what we all know is you deliver the system. And then a week later, if you're the senior architect, you wake up and you go, oh, that's how we should have done it. Right? Anybody been old enough, been there, done that? And that's with anything. So I had these riddles I was trying to solve. And I said, oh, that's the Gestalt round trip. The reason you get the aha is because you finally see the whole big picture, but then it's too late. So I evolved that around 2006, 8. It might have been in, it's the only thing not in the second edition of my Agile book, which came out in 2006. And I published it in 2008. So it was right in there. And I've lived off of that ever since. We are out of time. Got to give it to Bas. Thank you very much, everybody.
Big round of applause.